This is Mommying While Muslim, recorded live and unedited. Watch as Zeba and Uzma record their podcast, see their reactions, and find out for yourself what all the buzz is about.
This episode is sponsored by Guidance Residential. Check out their winter refinance special. Refinance now and receive a $500 credit. Experience the guidance difference today and apply at gr.link/smo_winterrefi21_22. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to another episode of Momming While Muslim podcast. This is Uzma Jaffrey.
And this is Zeba Hassan. I was so excited because we essentially came straight from our breakfast bylines on Fireside. So I get to see Uzma for a big chunk of today, considering we're batch recording. So I didn't get to see her last week. So that it makes me feel like I'm missing something. So how has your week been since the last time we've chit-chatted?
My week was really good because, and it may sound silly to you guys, but something that made me feel so special and so loved and cared for happened, and that was my husband and I went out for a date night. We had dinner, and when I asked for coffee at the end of the night, and decaf, don't worry, that's not why I'm staying up, by the way, Zeba.
I was like, don't do that.
Yeah, I do not need coffee at night. But they brought the cream in the little cream holder, and it was warm, Zeba.
You don't
Even
do
when
that's
I
how I'm. I
Even
do
when
that.
I make my own coffee, I put cold creamer in it, and I was
Why?
like, oh my gosh, how thoughtful.
That's the difference maker between a good cup of coffee and a bad cup of coffee. So
Yes.
I warm my cream. I don't drink coffee anymore, sadly. But even for my husband, when I make him I always warm the cream.
Yeah. Well,
Always.
that's probably because you're a very considerate person. I think it's the difference between a good cup of coffee and a great cup of coffee. And It was a great cup of coffee with the warmed creamer, and I think I'm going to start doing that for myself. That will be my self-care, because I almost cried. I'm not hormonal or anything. I almost cried because I was like, that's so nice of you guys. Like piping hot.
That is the key. That is the key, is to warm up the milk and put the milk in, and it just, it tastes so good, and now you're making me miss coffee.
It wasn't even milk, guys. It was like proper creamer. Creamer.
Heck. Yes.
Hot proper creamer. So have the hot proper creamer and your week will go really well. But tell me how your week went. Sans coffee.
Well, you know what? I'm like almost 3 months without caffeine in coffee, and I have to say I love it. I don't have those dips in the afternoon, so I'm not advocating it. It's not for everybody, but for me, it was definitely part of my wellness journey. But, my week is always crazy because, you probably hear a little bit of my voice being hoarse because guess what season it is now? It's basketball season in the Hassan household. And Mama screams and has to scream louder behind the mask. So guess what? I am screaming too loud, and every time I do, I think, oh my God, Uzma's going to be so annoyed with me. So I have been drinking tea, drinking water to make sure that my voice stays lubricated. So that's pretty much it because, it's my last season for my oldest to be playing, and I've been watching him play since he was 4 years old, and in a blink of an eye, it's almost done. And he's not one of those kids that are under any false illusion that he's going to be playing in college, nor does he want to. So this is going to be our last season watching him play basketball. So I am going to enjoy every second, every minute of it. And that's pretty much been my week, and what's going to be my week probably for the next 12 weeks. Till probably March, and I'm good with that. But I know we have a very particular soapbox from today, and it's kind of translating a little bit over from our breakfast bylines on Fireside. So Uzma, do you want to tell us what our soapbox for today is?
Yeah, I feel like we talked a lot about guns this morning at Breakfast Byline, so if you haven't been checking those out, go on over. Those are at 11 o'clock on Fridays. But this week we did it a little bit early. We're going to talk about the Rittenhouse trial because all of us were holding our hearts and hanging our heads about the verdict. As you know, Carl Rittenhouse, the 17-year-old who traveled to, was it Kenosha? I got to remember. It was Kenosha, Wisconsin, for to address the protests and the Black Lives Matter looting, quote unquote, tongue in cheek. I'm saying that. To address the looting that he anticipated was going to happen. And as a 17-year-old, he took a rifle to take out protesters. That was his aim and intent. However, he was found not guilty of all charges of homicide, manslaughter, everything basically the prosecution was trying to try him with, which incidentally, none of those charges included terrorism. So that's interesting. But, the reason why we're so upset is because, not just because they found so many loopholes and the defense was able to prove that he was acting in self-defense. This is a quote from Michael Waldman. He's the president of the Brennan Center for Justice at the NYU School of Law, and he wrote the Second Amendment, a biography, which is the title of his book. I have not read it, but I will be. You can bet your boots. This is a product of gun culture, he says. It's also a product of laws that give white men with guns the ability to create chaos and sometimes get away with it. The prosecution was saying, you can't create a dangerous situation and then call self-defense after you've created the situation. So don't create the problem and then you won't suffer the consequences. So for all Palestinians, I see you and this is for you. But basically what we have seen in the last year, and I think it's in response to the Rittenhouse situation, the trial that just ended, what we've seen in the last year, and we talked about on Breakfast Bylines too, is despite last summer and despite the violence that we saw last summer and despite all of the issues with guns that we saw, at least 3 states, including Ohio, have loosened their gun control laws in the last year, and there's been more guns sold. And this is problematic. Remember that Rittenhouse got off on one of his charges. It was dropped even pre-trial because he wasn't supposed to have a rifle for 2 reasons. One, he was a sexual offender from Arizona. It doesn't matter if you're a minor, but a minor with a minor, who was significantly younger back in 2002 in Arizona, he wasn't supposed to have a gun in the first place. And then he traveled and apparently in Kenosha borrowed his friend's stepfather's rifle, full-on rifle. And the charges were dropped because the law says that minors can't have short-barreled rifles. They can't have firearms, and when it comes to rifles, it's the short barrel. So it's these loopholes that are going to get, I believe, primarily more white children off of charges like Rittenhouse was. So this is going to be problematic. If you had changed the color of Rittenhouse's skin, I am 99% sure it would have gone differently. And so what we will see as a result of this trial is, again, more white vigilantism in the United States, which has been a problem for the last 300 years, as Black Americans know. But we will also see more children, I think, picking up guns and more school shootings happen. Our average is probably somewhere in the mid-20s. We haven't quite gotten there in 2021, but now that school is back in session like normal, I believe our guest today is going to have some insight about this particular topic. Rittenhouse, the travesty of justice that has occurred. We're going to feel the repercussions like front and center, and there's really nothing that we can do except hope that the families of the deceased, the 3 men who were killed, sue the crap out of Rittenhouse. Currently in my state, the university where he plans to enroll, there are several protests going on saying that he should not be allowed to come on campus and enroll in nursing, especially because per his social media, he was super pro-police and probably should belong in law enforcement because he did exactly what law enforcement does all the time, which is, kill unarmed bystanders. So that's our soapbox for today, and I'm sorry that there's no call to action or anything that we can do about it right now.
And I appreciate the soapbox, but I would like to qualify, not all people that are in law enforcement are killing other people.
Yes.
So I
want
to say that that as my feels like there's a lot of them, but there are some good police officers out there that are trying to do their things, and for those people, we do see you, and we appreciate it and keep helping your other brothers and sisters in the armed forces to keep that up. But I from one shocking news to another, the shocking truth is that there are like Muslim children, so many Muslim children in foster care systems, but guess what? They cannot be housed with other Muslim families. Why? Because we are not licensed to be foster families. Not only is it I believe, our social responsibility to get licensed, it is a religious imperative to get prepared for children of our faith communities and that their parents who actually need us. So we will be discussing this at length with our guest here today. Rania Shabib is the co-founder and board member of the Muslim Foster Care Association. Her and her husband are licensed foster parents and have 3 beautiful children of their own. She has fostered several domestic and refugee youth. We really applaud her for that. And she is trying to establish the needs to meet the growing needs of Muslim foster care children and their licensed caregivers through education, support, advocacy work. Rania also serves as the state of Michigan's Foster Care Review Board. As a board member, she regularly reviews foster care cases, provides an objective perspective to courts regarding the child's safety and care, as well as a permanency plan, because that's really ultimately the goal of foster care system. Rania has a background in education and public health, and we are so grateful that she is leading the charge for other Muslim families. Assalamu alaikum, Rania, and welcome to Mommying While Muslim.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Thank you.
So, before we get into the show, we usually ask our guests to tell us a little bit about their mommying story, whatever you're comfortable sharing, and about their mommying philosophy.
Oh, okay. My mommying story. I have 3 kids. My oldest is right now, there's 17, 16, and 12. 2 boys and a girl. And being a mother is such a blessing. And how I came to become a foster parent is I felt that the foster children were really no different than my own children. And I felt that, God forbid, if there was ever a time when my own children entered the foster care system, then I would want somebody that I trusted to step up and take on that responsibility.
That's amazing that you thought of, that way. Like if I ever needed foster care for my children. And I think there's this misconception in the community, at least in my community, and I'm talking about my immediate circle of friends, that you only go into foster care if there's some kind of abuse happening in the house. But you can also go in foster care if a parent is hospitalized for a prolonged period and there are minors left in the house and somebody has to step up and be responsible for them. We've had a couple of cases like that locally, and that's been an issue because these minors were basically left unattended at home, and we had to keep it hush-hush so that, they didn't end up in the system while their mom recovered, and that was a really long time. Before we started recording, Rania, you were explaining why your kids were home today, and just on the tail of our soapbox, I would like you to share with the audience why that is.
Yeah, so we live about 20 minutes away from Oxford High School here in Michigan, and everybody's aware of the tragedy that happened at Oxford High School. And then the local schools, after the tragedy, started to receive some threats, and there were some rumors circulating. So to veer on the side of caution, over 60 schools closed for Thursday and Friday, just to, make sure that the police could address any of these threats, and that the kids, had some time to kind of de-stress and come to terms with the anxiety that they were feeling before they go back to school, hopefully next week.
That's insane. Absolutely a travesty that they're so terrified.
I mean, isn't it sad that our kids, that is something that they're fearful of, right? It's not necessarily I think they're more fearful of shootings in schools than COVID and all these things that are that are just
and to hear them say, to hear them to say, yes, I don't feel safe at school. They don't feel safe at school. I mean, we have to hear that. We have to, listen to them when they say that, and we need to do better for them.
Yes, 100%. And, maybe we'll have you on because we talk about this at length, unfortunately, is just a part of our daily occurrence. Whether you're momming while Muslim or in any other faith circles, it's definitely something that moms feel very fearful of, sending their kids to school, gun control issues, the loopholes in gun control laws, and school shootings, which are very, very prevalent, unfortunately. But, to kind of go back to talking a little bit about the laws that prevent the adoption of unaccompanied minors. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and what does that even mean?
Yeah, so there's really essentially there's two different kinds of foster care. There's domestic foster care and then refugee foster care. So the children that come into the refugee foster care system as unaccompanied refugee minors, their parental rights have not been terminated. So technically they cannot be adopted. So when they enter foster care, typically they enter foster care as older youth. Some of them come younger, but typically they are older youth because it is a difficult journey, and it's typically the older youth that are capable of making that journey. Mm-hmm. So once they enter foster care, they stay in foster care until they age out of the system, which will be around between the ages of 18 and 21, depending on when they choose to leave foster care and be independent. Whereas domestic foster care is different. The goal of domestic foster care is reunification with the birth parents, so it's very different. Mm-hmm. So that's always the goal. It's not always achievable. So the judge may at some point decide that the parental rights are terminated. And then in that case, for domestic foster care, the child would become eligible for adoption. But that doesn't apply to refugee foster kids.
Okay, got it.
And a lot of that is because the hope is also that in the future, whenever the unrest in their countries of origin settles down, that they will be reunited with their families.
Yeah, so a lot of times the kids that come as refugee foster kids, either their parents are deceased or at some point due to the conflict, they've been separated from their parents. From either one parent or both parents, they've been separated.
Yeah, and international law forbids the adoption of these kids.
So I don't know if it's international law specifically, but I do know that since the parental rights were never terminated, that they're not eligible for adoption.
My understanding is that the international child trafficking laws prevent that. So that's something that we'll have to look up or, ask someone.
Yeah.
But you're saying that a lot of these unaccompanied refugee minors are going to be in their teens. I know in Arizona we're anticipating about 100 coming over, and the minimum age is 15. So all of the people that came as potential foster care parents immediately stepped back when they heard that. And some of those were because of the Mfca issue. So can you talk about that for our audience?
Yeah, sure. And I'll say, just to kind of backtrack a bit, we've always had Muslim kids coming as unaccompanied refugee minors. This isn't really a new thing. I think right now, because, we see things play out in the media, and of course, because the most recent crisis is what's going on in Afghanistan, people have kind of a heightened awareness right now, but it is something that's, always been around. We've always needed licensed foster homes for domestic kids and refugee kids. Now, going to you were speaking in your area locally, the kids that you've received. I can speak to Michigan. We've just the Afghan refugee kids, we've received about 250 in Michigan alone. Wow. And I think they're brought to Michigan because we have MFCA here, so we're able to provide support, and also because they know that there's a large Muslim community in Michigan, and so the hope is to keep the kids connected to the Muslim community. I will say what we, just specifically with this group, we've seen kids as young as 10 years old arrive. So yes, they are typically older teenagers, but we have seen kids as young as 10 as well. And now regarding the Mahram issue, there's, that's definitely.
But first of all, for not to interrupt you, but for our non-Muslim audience, as we know, a majority of our listeners are non-Muslim. What does mahram actually mean first, and then talk about why people are fearful of the mahram issue, specifically where older kids are concerned?
Sure. So I'm not an Islamic scholar, but in my own words, A mahram is somebody that a male that is closely related to you and is essentially somebody that you cannot marry. And this is somebody that could be your father, your son, your brother, your uncle, grandfather. These are all considered mahrams. So somebody is a non-mahram if they are not in one of those positions or roles within the family. So, for example, bringing in an older teenage youth would be a non-mahram coming into your home and living with you, and essentially you're the caretaker of that non-mahram youth. Um, so there are some boundaries that may need to be set up within the home, but these are very manageable boundaries, and they're not to be seen as obstacles. It's definitely manageable, and it still allows for fostering. And I always like to point to the examples of within the Islamic faith tradition, fostering is something that's embedded in our faith traditions. So we have the examples from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that shows us that these things are permissible and Muslims are encouraged to do it. Um, I can tell you, I know Muslim women that foster older youth, male youth, and what they do, for example, if they wear hijab, then they just, they have certain areas of the home, for example, that they tell the youth that, this is my area, please don't come here, like in the bedroom area. And so that she has an area within the home that she feels that she can take off her hijab and not have to worry about that. And then the youth is mindful of those boundaries. But it's definitely something that's manageable and can be worked around.
That's really helpful because I know that that's a big deterrent to a lot of people because, oh, I can't have a non-mahram in my house, and that's categorically untrue. So,
Yeah,
Yeah,
and we appreciate you following up with that because there are, I would imagine, circumstances like you said, you can create different places in the house. There's so many things that you can do to kind of overcome some of those obstacles, and I believe that MFCA probably has a lot of that written down, so to kind of help aid some of that transitional the transitional piece of that.
yeah. And I will also say that, when you are a foster parent, you will receive a call that will say, we have this child. Are you willing to welcome this child to your home? And if you are only comfortable with females, then you can say, I only want females. And there are definitely, female youth in the foster care system that are in need of a home. So even if the muhram issue is something that's, for whatever reason you see as being too difficult, there are absolutely other options.
No, I appreciate that. I feel like, first of all, you're an angel to be taking on teenagers voluntarily that are not your own. So I definitely commend you and commend everybody that would do that because it's definitely
Yeah.
a challenging situation regardless. And then you add teenager and the angst and all that comes along. So it really takes a certain type of person to do that. And we need more people like that stepping forward. But, I would imagine that you have a lot of memorable experiences as a refugee foster mom. Do you mind sharing? It can be a memorable one. It can be something that you were like, a challenging one. We kind of want to know the reality behind being a refugee foster mom.
Yeah. So I've fostered both domestic and refugee, and I've fostered kids anywhere from as young as 3 months old to older teenagers. One memory that always sticks with me, because I feel it's such a beautiful memory and I love sharing it with people. My very first foster daughter, who was also a refugee, and English was not her first language. And one day, after she was performing her prayer, I saw her making a supplication, making dua. And afterwards she said, do you want to know what I was praying for? And I said, sure. And she said, I made a dua that may Allah allow the angels to welcome you into heaven the way that you welcomed me into your home as a stranger.
Oh,
And
I
I
love
just thought,
that.
wow. I mean, for her to have those thoughts and to be able to even, relay that to me in English, it was just so profound to me and really impacted me. And it was something that really stuck with me. And you're right, having teenagers in your home, or, you know, having children in your home that are not your biological children, but essentially you're their advocate. You have to be the one to advocate for all of their needs. And it's absolutely challenging. It absolutely changes your family dynamics, but the reward is just I don't have words to describe the reward. I believe that there's rewards that we'll see here in this life, but I also believe that there's rewards that are unseen to us. But the reward is just immeasurable. So I truly believe that anything that has a reward to it will have some challenge to it.
I love that.
Nothing comes easy. No, that's a beautiful, beautiful memory. Oh my gosh. Should write that down somewhere. I hope you have. So going back to the Muslim Foster Care Association, can you tell us a little bit about how that originated and how it can help potential or current foster families in terms of the potential? Does it have like its own training program outside of like foster care college that most states have?
Yeah, so when I first became licensed, it was pretty immediate that I realized I needed support and that my Muslim community was not familiar with foster care. And although they were very well intentioned, didn't really know how to support us as a family or how to support our foster youth that were living with us. A mutual friend connected me with another Muslim foster family, and her and I became each other's support. And we soon realized that, if we're going through this, imagine what the kids are going through. And we realized that we needed to start an organization to support the Muslim kids in foster care and to support the families that are taking care of them, because we know the vast majority of the homes that the kids are placed in are homes of other faiths. So if we want to keep that child connected to their faith, we have to be able to work with the family that is fostering them. So there's different things that we do. We work to raise awareness within the community. We provide educational training to foster care workers, to licensed families on best practices for caring for a Muslim foster child. We work to keep the child connected with their faith community through tutors and mentors. And basically, even with transportation, making sure that they have a way to get to their local mosque. We provide them with care packages. Whenever we are notified that a Muslim child enters foster care, we provide them with a care package that has some faith-based items and really introduce ourselves to the child so that they know they have a connection to us. We also help agencies with placement. So they'll call us and say, we have a Muslim child that we're looking to place. Do you have a home, a Muslim home, or can you help us place this child? So there's so many things that we work to support the children with. And I'm sorry, what was the last part of your question? I tried to remember.
Oh, it was on the lines of the training there's the foster college, the hours that you have to put in for education in order to get licensed to be a foster parent.
Yeah.
Does the MFCA provide that for Muslim families?
So we actually provide that more for the agencies and for the licensed families of other faiths on how to care for a Muslim child. So we do work with agencies to provide that training. And you're absolutely right. To become licensed, you have to complete a certain number of hours of training. But then once you receive your license, each year to maintain your license, you also have to complete a certain number of hours of training. So yeah, that is something that we're involved with the agencies, but it's more geared towards non-Muslims.
Okay. No, that's helpful to know.
No, I definitely appreciate that because it sounds like you also work with non-Muslim families and kind of get them up to speed on the faith base if they happen to have Muslim children in their home.
Right, absolutely.
Is that correct?
Because we know
perfect.
We know that the foster child will not feel that they're in a position to advocate for themselves and to speak up.
Right.
So they probably won't say, during Ramadan, they probably won't
I need
say,
to do
oh,
this. Yeah.
I need to have a meal before the sun rises. I need to have a meal when the sun sets. On Fridays, I'd like to go to the mosque, or, just those basics that they may not feel comfortable saying anything. So we want to make sure that we're educating those that are around the foster child, that are supporting them, so that they have an awareness of what the needs of the child are. Because we want to
No,
make
I
sure
love
that these are
that.
positive experiences and positive relationships for the child, so that we have positive outcomes. Because we want to make sure, we know that there's a lot of turnover with foster families. So we want to do what we can to support the families so that they can continue to foster.
I love that. So you kind of alluded to this earlier in our conversation. How is the Islamic definition of fostering different than, what we know here in the West as like being a foster family and fostering a child?
So when you're a foster family, you're essentially the temporary guardian for that child, right? So we know that they're sometimes people use the word orphan, and I don't like using the word orphan because I think that gets kind of confusing and it's not very accurate, because most foster kids do have biological parents that are living, but their circumstances are that they need temporary guardianship, and they need a safe and stable, loving home to care for them just for that period of time. And as the foster family, you're not the one that's making the decisions, when the child goes back to their parents, or when. That's not something that you're really involved in. Your goal is to ensure that the child has a safe and stable home and that their needs are being met.
Got it.
And that is not unlike what we have in our sunnah, right? Of like assuming guardianship for a set period of time.
Right. So you're not changing their identity
for a child.
Right. And I think, I think what's really important within our deen is that you don't change the child's identity, right? They still know who they are. They know who their parents are, and that's very important.
When it comes to the unaccompanied refugee minors, though, is there a way to support them, whether it's through Mfca or through the state agencies, to support them through like a history of trauma, or obviously because they're refugees they carry one level of trauma, but is there any additional support for the traumatic experiences that a lot of refugee kids have on top of that?
Yeah, so there's definitely the trauma that they've endured. I think it's important for really all foster kids to maintain strong, lasting relationships. They've had so much unexpected change in their life and so much instability that stability alone is so, what's the word? You see such positive results come from just having that stability. They have a lot of needs. Sometimes I look at my own children and what their needs are, and then, if you compare to foster kids, have even more needs because they've been through the trauma, they've been through the instability, right? So they have more needs. So there's so many ways that we can work to support them. Even if the biggest thing I would encourage people is to become a licensed foster family. There's such a shortage of licensed foster families, and there's such a need. And it always breaks my heart when kids are placed in group homes or residential homes. They deserve a home environment with a family, rather than that group setting. That's what they deserve. So become licensed. If you can't, then volunteer with an agency near you. Become a tutor or a mentor. If you can't do that, just help with transportation. And those are relatively easy things that just require like background checks and some training. But we want to show up for these kids. We need them to know that we are there for them. Our community is really good at donating money, right? We're a very generous community when it comes to donations, but this is a cause that really takes some sacrifice on our end, and our time and our effort. and we're going to have to do more than make donations. I mean, donations are wonderful. Don't get me wrong. We still want those, but we want to give from ourselves as well.
Yeah. So just on the heels of that, I feel like that comment is perfect for my next question, which is, what kind of support can the community give MFCA in doing its good work?
A lot of what we do is making connections. So we connect with different organizations that can support the work that we're doing. People can go to our website and see the work that we're doing and see if there's, something that they're interested in, being involved in, or want to know more about. Or even if it's just, making a donation, you can even specify what you would like your donation to go to, and we'll ensure that. So there's even just your prayers, just making dua, then that's something that we appreciate as well. So there's different ways to be supportive and helping get the word out. I think, we're still in the stage where I know now within our communities, people are starting to understand what foster care looks like and what it's about. And I think continuing that conversation so that there's no stigma attached to it, or there's no, there's more of that deeper understanding. If you have a foster family near you, ask how you can support them. Maybe you bring them a meal one day. Maybe you help with transportation one day. Let them know that you're there for them.
On that note, if you did, would it be kind of like, how we help our own mom sisters? Like, oh, can you pick up my kid from here? He forgot lunch? Can you drop it off there? In terms of actually, having even temporary from your car to their home, dropping them off, if that was just a conversation that we had with another foster parent, would that require a background check before a foster parent was allowed to say, hey, to my girlfriend, pick up my kid from school, because whatever?
Yes.
How does that process look?
Foster kids are very protected, right? And rightfully so, because they're very vulnerable and they need to be protected. So yes, if there's somebody that's helping you with transportation, or having that one-on-one alone contact with the foster child, then yes, they will need a background check. But it's so simple to get a background check. All you have to do is fill out, a few questions, submit your driver's license, and then you're good for the year. Background checks need to be renewed every year.
Yeah.
But it's very helpful for foster families.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I mean, that's something super easy that we're all able to do, but it's getting into contact with those Muslim foster families that are in, and even, to be honest, non-Muslim families who are fostering, they need the same kind of support, right? So if we can offer that, I feel like that's one way to glue our very dispersed, very garage door only neighbors that we have transformed into in the last 20 years. We weren't like this before, so let's bring us back together.
I mean, we need to be part of the conversation, right? We need to be at the table. So I absolutely agree. It's regardless of the foster family's faith or who they're fostering, we need to be there to be a support for them, because essentially we're all in this for the kids. And we need to ensure their stability and their well-being.
100%. For a lot of Muslim families, they still think that, they don't understand that there's a licensing process, and both parents in the household, like basically all adults in the household, have to be licensed foster parents, right, before a foster child is brought in.
So not all the adults, as long as there's, but if it's a married couple, then both the husband and the wife will have to go through the licensing. The licensing process takes 3 to 6 months. My husband and I were able to do it in 3 months. There's a lot of paperwork involved. You have to undergo some training. There's background checks. They interview everybody in the home. They do home visits to make sure that the home is safe. You have to submit all of your monthly bills. You have to submit your pay stubs, because they have to ensure that your income is able to cover your monthly expenses. I mean, some people see these things as intrusive, but honestly, again, they're just ensuring the well-being and the safety of the child. So there's definitely good reason for it. And it's doable. Yes, there is some work on your end to become licensed, but it's absolutely doable. In these days, with everything being virtual, so many of the trainings are offered virtually. So I think it's, in that sense, it's even easier than, several years ago when we were licensed.
That's wonderful to know. And for anybody listening who's ever thought about it and who's considering it, please just at least find out what's required in your state. Pretty much all the state agencies operate in this general manner that Rania has described, but there may be some more specific stuff, or maybe your hours are a little bit longer or whatever in your state. So find out how to do it, and find out about the ways that you can support these agencies and the families that are aligned with them, even if it means that you don't bring a child into your house. But there are ways, not just with rides and the meals, but you talked about respite. I think before we recorded, offering respite to a foster care family, where if they're going on vacation, they're not allowed to take the child out of state, correct?
Well, so to take a child out of state, you just need court approval. So it's relatively easy to get court approval, especially, in some cases you may need the permission of the birth parents. But usually you can take them out of state, but you cannot take them out of the country.
Yeah. So if you were going overseas, then you would need a family to take care of the foster children temporarily, and that's providing respite care. So if that's something that you can do for a couple of weeks, it's kind of like having, a guest, basically, because that's what these kids are, and we know how honored and holy guests are in our tradition. So, like this child made this beautiful dua for you, hopefully they're going to make it for you as well. That would be like the ultimate Amin, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I mean, all I know is that I'm going to be looking up my local foster care, and that's something that, is there like a national database of that per state that we can kind of go and look and see where we can get some of this training, or see if there are places for us to either volunteer? Because I know I have a couple of older kids that would love to be tutors. Like, are there different types of organizations like that you can tell us in addition to Mfca, and how we can get involved?
Yeah, so what I tell people is to, look for agencies near you. I do want to say, though, that not every area has refugee foster care services. There are only, I believe, like 20 cities in all of the U.S. that have services for refugee foster care. So if you don't have that in your area, there's still domestic foster care is everywhere. So that's still something that you can look for in your area. And ask them, what does it entail to become a volunteer, and let them know that you're interested in volunteering. And I would start from there. I would also start by trying to identify the foster families in your area and see how you can help them directly as well.
Got it. I love that. I absolutely love that.
Are we ready for our rapid fire? This is Zeba's favorite part,
gosh.
because we've talked so heavy. Like, it's inspiring, but it's also really heavy. Like, oh, we have so much work to do. SubhanAllah.
Yes, I know. I'm like
Atlas.
writing my mental notes right after this. Go look this up. Go do this. Let's get involved.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is we tend to be in this bubble of a world. What you get caught up in your day to day. So when we have these really amazing, frank conversations of things that we need to be doing within our communities, I personally use it as a reminder of, okay, I feel like I'm doing a lot, but I'm not. So let me go and start getting that done. So I definitely appreciate that, Rania. And right now, I think we're going to add 90 seconds to our timer, if that's okay. Uzma, do you mind timing us? And essentially what I'm going to do is give you a whole bunch of rapid fire questions, and to put you on the spot, and I want you to just give me your instant response. And it's a way for us to get to know you a little bit better, in a more intimate way. But my first question always is, what's your favorite book, or what are you currently reading?
Oh, one book that I really enjoyed reading was White Fragility.
I've heard about that one.
I love that. That's a great book, and I tell people, please read that. What was the career you dreamed about when you were a kid?
As a kid, I thought I was going to be a veterinarian.
Oh, that's so funny. I thought I was going to be a cashier, and I thought that was going to be so funny, so fun.
Aim high.
We talked a little bit about your favorite memories of being a foster care mother, but like, what is something within the foster care system that you can relay to us that involved your children and your whole family as being part of this foster care support system?
one of my favorite things for my kids is for them to hear the stories directly from the foster
Yes.
youth, and for them to see where the kids came from, and so that they have that realization that the life that they live is a very comfortable life,
Privileged.
and that
Yeah.
exactly, and that there are kids out there that don't have the same privileges as them.
I love that. And this is going to be your last question because I love to hear this. But if you didn't have to sleep, sleep is my favorite thing. Everybody that listens to the podcast knows I love sleep. But if you didn't have to sleep and you had all this extra time, what would you do with that time?
You know, my favorite thing is sleeping. My other thing is eating.
Eating.
8 extra hours of eating good food. That's a blessing.
But it has
That
to
was
come
the
with the
first thing
caveat
that
of
came
not
to
gaining
mind.
weight.
Right, exactly. And you're like, can I eat everything and not gain weight, or eat everything and then develop a super fat power? I would love that.
I'll find a way.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Did you have any last thoughts for our audience, Rania, before we wrap up today?
I just want to say thank you for bringing awareness to foster care and really the need for licensed homes. And this is a conversation that I really hope that people continue to have. And just, find a way to be a part of the conversation, find a way to be a part of the solution. If we all do a little bit, it'll really make a lasting impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Like talking about it and lamenting about it over chai at a party, which is what a lot of us do. We can be part of the solution.
Yes.
And again, even if it means that a child doesn't enter your home, there is always something that we can do. As moms, there's always time for a child on our plate, I feel like, even if it's not yours. I feel like all children belong to me, so
Yes.
that's how I operate.
Yes.
But I hope that, and I know that extends outside of my kitchen table, but I know that many, many moms share that belief, and I hope that you do something about it.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, thank
So with
you.
that, thank you so much for joining us today, and we so appreciate you, Rania. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
This episode is sponsored by Guidance Residential. Check out their winter refinance special. Refinance now and receive a $500 credit. Experience the guidance difference today and apply at gr.link/SMO_winterrefi21_22.